Safe Software is pleased to present the 2009 FME International User Conference. This session is presented by Clayton Wise, an enterprise architect for Hampton Roads Sanitation District. Clay has a master's degree from Old Dominion University and has been working in the GIS field since 1996. His particular area of expertise is in ESRI HRSD administration and Oracle database programming and administration. Clay is GIS certified and is also an Oracle certified professional in both 9i and 10.
Who are we? Hampton Roads Sanitation District. We basically treat the sanitary sewer for the Hampton Roads area. If you don't know where that is, it's basically east coast of the U.S., right at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay. There's a nice little shot of the beach in the fall. Our mission is to prevent pollution, protect public health, support community development by providing wastewater collection and treatment. Many of the localities that we deal with have gravity, force main, which is pressure, and vacuum systems because the elevation is so, it's at sea level. I guess places like this don't have to worry about vacuum systems, but like I said, we treat the sanitary sewer for over 1.7 million people. There's more than 500 miles of pipe. This is just our system. This isn't the other jurisdictions that we deal with. It's just the HRSD force main system to the treatment plants. The diameter of the pipes can range anywhere from 6 to 66 inches. We have 102 pump stations, 9 treatment plants spread out throughout the region, and 231 million gallons of sewage is treated, or sanitary sewer is treated daily. And we serve 17 cities and counties. That red line that I kind of outlined in Google Earth was just to kind of show you regionally. That on the far right is the eastern shore of Virginia and Maryland. To kind of put this in context, I worked for the city of Virginia Beach in their utility department and ran their GIS for a few years. And what came down was the Commonwealth of Virginia put a state order on the region to reduce sanitary sewer overflows into the Chesapeake Bay to clean up the environment. That percentage was very low, but the restrictions, the regulations were very stringent. So I was hired by HRSD to come in and to try to help build a dynamic GIS. So the task they had at hand was mostly force main system. Only 14 out of the 17 were required to provide data. The other 3 jurisdictions are kind of in the Stone Ages, so to speak, when it comes to GIS, and their systems were relatively small, so the state didn't feel like they needed to be in this system. What happened was we had 14 jurisdictions. When I was given the data initially, they were all in different formats. They were all at different GIS technical levels when you looked at them. You had all kinds of issues going on. Like I said, numerous data inputs. We had over 1,800 pump stations, 6,500 miles of sewer mains, and 120,000 sewer structures, manholes, vaults, etc. The challenge was data sharing. We not only, part of the state order was not only for us to take in this jurisdictional GIS data, it was also to provide ours back to them and any results that we received from a hydraulic model. I don't know if any of y'all have ever dealt with hydraulic modeling software, but people that say like FME and GIS and stuff like that's pretty boring stuff. I don't know if you've ever opened up any kind of hydraulic modeling software, but it's like watching paint dry, all the inputs you have to do. With that being said, all the different inputs that you have, what we ended up coming up with was standardizing and making the jurisdictions provide us with a standardized GIS data model to make it easier for us to input that into the regional hydraulic model. Part of that was because they were at different levels of GIS, we had to have a way to do data validation and standardize their data. This not only included the one time for the benchmark dates that they had to provide data to us, but it was also updates in the future when we update the regional model. What are we validating? Now, this all started in Workbench when you start doing it. There on FMEpedia, there's some samples for FME Server, and we were going through a process of looking at what were our different options on doing data validation. I've been using FME since 1999, and I wanted to look into that part mainly because I had seen Server and saw the capabilities of it and how it was very everything was web-based and it would be a great way to go about doing it. But the other reason was because the engineering firm that was on contract for the hydraulic model had provided us with a quote on what it would take to do the same type of thing that FME Safe Software was already providing at a substantially higher cost for a customized application. I started talking to Safe Software about our requirements and what we needed, and it was apparent to me that this was the route that we needed to go. That being said, there was a document that all the jurisdictions agreed upon in the state order that had, in that structure of that GIS database that I was talking about, where they had to agree upon the GIS fields and what data would be in those fields, and there was a document that was agreed upon, and that's what I used to build the validation tool. And if you are planning on doing this with a number of different jurisdictions or companies, I would highly recommend having that document in place before you start working on something like this, because you're going to be going after a moving target. And this is something you can hold them accountable to because they agreed upon it. We looked at every single field, looked at what was in those fields, making sure they were correct, and then looking at how many were correct out of the total number of features in that layer. Also, if the data was spatially correct. That's a big deal because, like I said, the different levels of GIS expertise that we had in each jurisdiction, some of them were very good, and some of the ones that you would even think were good really weren't. It's one of those things where you start seeing how good is their data, and anytime you put something under the microscope like that, you're going to find some of the problems. I also had to validate against the geometries of the features, because I ran into, when you're pushing this data into SDE, you'll find that the zero length lines and self-intersecting polygons was a major issue, and it will puke. Are there connection points valid? Connection points, and I think I get into this, okay, is where a jurisdiction connects to HRSD's force main system. It's the exact point. We have many, many connection points all over our system. Checking to see if these IDs, if there's a master list that the engineering department maintains, and they had unique identifiers on every single one of these connection points. We wanted to be able to, that was provided to the jurisdiction, and then the jurisdiction was at that point responsible for making sure their GIS features had that unique ID. This connection point check is pretty valuable in the sense that it goes out, it knows what's jurisdiction, and then it validates those points against it. Spatially correct, like I was telling you, zero length lines and self-intersecting polygons. I was pretty much beating my head against the wall on that one. That was a good one until I figured out what was going on. With 14 jurisdictions, we run into all levels of GIS users. I've already said that. Workbench. So not to get confused, I know a lot of people, server's a new thing to a lot of people. The thing about it is you want to make sure that the way that you develop these things, it's all in Workbench. So if you're familiar with Workbench and you start doing this, don't get overwhelmed with how FME Server works, because it's actually a fairly easy process. If we have time, I have a couple of very short Camtasia demos that I did of the download, the upload, and then actually running the process if we have time. The desktop product to develop and publish data validation, you basically do all your work in the construction of the process in Workbench, and then you post it up to server to test your application. Once published, the workspace can run through a web browser, which makes it great because they don't have to have an FME license to run the translation once you start handing this off to other users after you've developed the process. And the one thing that I like a lot is being able to internally, if there's changes that need to be made, I can do it. Like I said, with FME Workbench, you use the desktop product to construct and develop the validation process, and it's a simple upload. And you can see where you have the publish to server and download from server. Usually what you do is if you already have it posted to FME Server, you just open up a blank Workbench file and then go to download from server, if you know that's a good working process, and bring it into Workbench and make your changes that you need to make. The nuts and bolts of data validation. Basically, this is a very, very small snapshot of a corner of the beginning of one of the layers, but it's an ongoing process through all the different features. You have these testers on the far left in the blue. Whatever the feature class is or the attribute that you're testing, like you also have custom transformers in green. And those are actually were built in the sample, the validation sample that SAFE provided. And you can change those or manipulate them if you need to. what I'm looking for. And those testers that you were seeing on the far left, a lot of them are pretty standard, where I was looking for null values, things that would make the hydraulic model fail. The modelers were looking for certain standards. They had grouped how important certain fields were. And that's why I was looking for null values, specific values, if they had their locality code in there. Also range values and elevation. Those are just a couple examples. Showing the results. This validation tool shows the results on the web. So it's a little bit different process than just pushing it out to, say, a different file format. You're actually pushing the results out to a variable on a web page. In the drop-down menus, I'll show it to you guys when we do the demo, hopefully, is the drop-down menus, you use a unique ID. It doesn't matter if that unique ID is going to be shown or not in your web report, but it has to be there for the data to process. Also, you'll see a CFG 01 pump stations at this error message placeholder. That's the variable that's pushed out to the web page. This same shot, just zoomed in on the bottom part of it. If you look at it, it's just simple HTML showing the count, the fail count on the record to show you how many out of the total number were either correct or incorrect. Also, I'm calling out that CFG 01 pump stations. You can call that whatever you want, as long as it's in both your Workbench file and on your HTML page. This is a snapshot of the HTML page, and you can see that where I'm calling out that exact same variable that was in the Workbench file. And I use Dreamweaver. I've seen in the FME training sessions they use Ultra Edit. So I think anything will pretty much, you can hack it up. If you look at the code, basically I had a lot of, after the first run, I got a lot of comments back from the modelers on, they wanted to make it very user-friendly. When they view it, they wanted to be able to immediately know what was correct and what was incorrect. And so I had to color code the features by whether they were red or green for if they were valid or if they were invalid. And I also, for connection points, which was something distinct, they wanted a blue color for that one. So I took all their input and tried to make it as good as I possibly could. This is a snapshot of the results. The way that we grouped them was summary checks were, they wanted to know the linear feet of pipe. They wanted to know the total number of miles of pipe from this jurisdiction. And then they wanted to know the gravity, the force main, and the vacuum, if they had it. They also wanted to know the connection points. So there's 84 out of 92 pipe features that don't have the correct connection points. This information is invaluable in the sense that you can run this, give it to the people that need to correct their GIS data, and just tell them they're not in compliance. Because if the state were asking us questions about why aren't we using Suffolk's data or another jurisdiction's data, we can easily turn to this and say, look, this is why they weren't in compliance. In red, so the modelers want to be able to run this and then immediately look at it and go, okay, there's a lot of green, but these are necessary fields for the model to actually run. These are kind of icing on the cake. So the way they looked at it was, okay, you've got 4 different attributes that are necessary for the model to run that they don't have correct, so they know they have to fix those. Once the data is correct, the upload page will show up. Now they've already loaded their data to have it validated, so really when you hit the load button, it's just taking that data that's there and processing it into SDE for us. The jurisdiction will then be able to upload their data through our firewall. Now, right now what we're dealing with is we have this internally, and I have the engineers using this. I've integrated it with, I don't know if y'all have seen the Flex viewer for ArcGIS. In one of those drop-downs, I basically have it called out for FME Server. And what that enables me to do is I've developed this product, I've run through the tests, I've worked with the engineers to get it right. Now I'm letting them run the reports internally. The next logical step is to let these jurisdictions start doing it on their own so that we don't have to run these reports and to have them load their own data. To do that, we feel a lot more comfortable. We just purchased the Oracle Identity Management Package, and I plan on implementing that when I get back. What that'll let me do is, so that if the person logs in, we give them the URL and they're in, what I don't want them to be able to do is back up that URL and then be able to see other FME server processes that I currently have on that box. This will let us lock them down to a URL, but there's also other applications that they need for this state order. such as Telog, to be able to look at the metering. Some of the stuff kind of that the prior presentation was talking about with when you're talking about metering and being able to see rainfall, rain gauges and things like that. We have to measure the meters, I think it's every 2 minutes, and we'll have 250 meters, so it's quite a bit of data to be able to graph that stuff out. And we don't want everybody to be able to access that, so it's going to be locked down to a certain extent. The validation tool is great, and the thing that it kind of did was it kind of opened up Pandora's box to a lot of other things that HRSD wanted to implement. One of these being the City of Suffolk came to us and asked us to merge their parcel and their water meter data with billing. We house their billing data. It's a kind of an odd setup, and we don't do this for all the jurisdictions, but we house their billing data. The only way that their billing representatives in the City of Suffolk is they go through a web front end and enter in new customers, or they take out an account, that type of thing. But we actually house the data at HRSD. Now, what they were asking me for was they wanted to be able to link their parcels and their water meters so they could say if they had outstanding accounts, they could easily see that spatially. The problem with it was I didn't want to be basically a data monkey. I didn't want them handing me their parcels and their water meters every day, and then I had to go join it to their billing data and then FTP it back to them or whatever. So what I did was I created an FME server site to be able to say, you maintain your GIS parcels, you maintain your water meters, you run this process. All they had to do is there was two inputs, which is very small down at the bottom. Sorry about that. But you basically say their parcels and their water meters, and they hit run. At that point, it will create a zip file of their parcels and their water meters, but joined with all the fields from the billing system that they wanted. I'm just trying to show you guys that there's a lot of other applications that you can do with this. A lot of it's data download, but there are the data streaming services. This was a really good run for us in the winter of 2008. Like I said before, the modelers provided me with a lot of feedback. Sorry about the Mac advertisement. Go away. Goodbye. Some jurisdictions didn't have very clean data, and I was able to tell them that in that geometry check and that web page with the summary data. And basically the summary linear feet of pipe and the connection points, you saw that stuff. The thing that I really like about it, like I said, is that I have control over the changes. We're not relying upon a firm, an outside consultant to help us. And I also want to say that Aaron from SAFE was very helpful in answering a lot of my dumb questions that I had. All right. The HRSD can quickly give this information to jurisdictions. Instead of it taking weeks for manual checks, if you can imagine, to be able to look at whether the data is spatially valid and then to look at all these feature classes in their fields and have somebody go manually and query how many features have this ID, how many features have null features. I mean, it would take, weeks. Being able to share those reports with the jurisdictions. Currently, the way we do it is we copy it from the web page, paste it into Word, email it out very quickly. Eventually, it's going to be, I'm hoping by the early fall, it's going to be to the point where they're going to be doing it. They're going to be able to see the web report. They can hit the print button. That's it. And it's an efficient way for them to be able to stay their data current and valid for the state order. Non-GIS personnel can run this. I mean, it's not, once you get it to a point where it's on the web form, it's not rocket science. Are there any questions? Yes?
So all the validation was done on GIS files,
Now, it could have easily been done on, it was actually done on some non-spatial tables. There weren't any CAD files, but I can't see why it would be any different. I mean, you would basically just be connecting up those testers to, have a different input, a different, not destination, but source. What I was going to try to show was, this is basically the web form. If you look at it, it's very simple. You can do the split thing and where you're looking at what it's going to look like nice and pretty and then what it's going to look like in the code. I thought I had it up, was the workbench file. I can try to do this. This is just going to show, I'm hoping, a quick hopefully we have time. All I'm doing here is a blank workspace. I'm downloading from server, just so if none of y'all have ever seen this. I'm logging into the server, and I've saved my default, so all I have to do is put my password in. I go to next. You have repositories. It's kind of like a folder-based structure in Windows, if you're used to that. As you can see, I have kind of a bunch of them from messing with this stuff. I already have a version 7 in there, so it's going to prompt me about overwriting it on my local drive. Just hit save, and then download. And of course, the bigger your Workbench file is, it take a couple seconds for it to download. Or more. I don't have any tricks or anything to be able to do to pass the time, but all right. And I zoomed out. Now, the one thing that Aaron did show me that I would highly recommend, that I know you probably didn't see it, but for a split second, was there's a cloner transformer. Now, I saw a magazine that was out front, and they had a screenshot of somebody's Workbench file, and it was scary. And it had, it was, so mine was like that, and Aaron helped me with that. So I'm a recovering Workbench, I'm like, you don't want to see the old ones, but the cloner helps with organizing your connections and being able to have that data process. I think I've got FME up right now. If I were to zoom out, you'll see what I'm talking about. See how I have this cloner right there? Taking all those connections and putting it there rather than to the one part where you have the HTML, where you have the process going to the HTML page, it makes it actually readable. Other than that, I guess I can show a couple of these other videos, but I think we're out of time. You got a question?